I want to reveal a gardening secret that honestly, still makes me blush a little, even after all these years. For nearly 2 decades, I cultivated tomatoes the same way, year after year. Each spring, I'd head to the garden center, pick up a tray of celebrity or better boy seedlings, bring them home, and dig holes about 90 centimeters apart in a perfectly straight row. I'd add a handful of October 10 fertilizer, then cage them with those flimsy, cone-shaped wire structures. The rest of the summer was a relentless battle, watering, spraying, pruning suckers, fighting blight, swatting mosquitoes, and getting my arms scratched reaching into those tangled masses, desperately searching for ripe fruit hidden deep within. Picture this: July, 33 degrees Celsius heat, sweat pouring down my back, plants over 1.8 meters tall, collapsing over those cheap cages. I'd be tying them up with old t-shirt strips as if performing emergency surgery. And at the season's end, after all that effort, all that money spent on sprays, fertilizers, and replacing rusted cages every other year, my harvest was meager. Perhaps 27 to 32 kilograms from an entire row of 12 plants. That's less than 2.7 kilograms per plant. Yet, I genuinely believed I was doing well. I'd proudly deliver a bag of tomatoes to my neighbors, oblivious to what was truly possible. My perspective completely shifted about 7 years ago during a long weekend visit with families in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. If you've never experienced it, it's truly beautiful country, rolling green hills, pristine white farmhouses with expansive wraparound porches, horses gently pulling buggies along narrow back roads, and gardens flourishing everywhere you look. I was visiting a family I'd connected with through a mutual friend, and the wife, a woman named Ruth, was giving me a tour of their property. Ruth, a mother of 7 with her youngest still nursing, managed their entire kitchen garden herself while also assisting with the dairy operation. Her entire vegetable garden, and I mean everything, tomatoes, beans, cucumbers, squash, greens, root vegetables, herbs, totaled maybe 93 square meters. I recall thinking that was barely larger than my tomato patch alone. But then, she led me to a particular raised bed. It was approximately 1.2 meters by 1.2 meters, perhaps slightly wider, constructed from old barn boards to a height of about 45 centimeters. From this bed grew tomato plants so robust, so healthy, and so laden with fruit that I literally stopped in my tracks. I just stood there, captivated. The plants were meticulously tied to a cedar lattice structure her husband had built, and every single branch was heavy with clusters of tomatoes in various stages of ripening. I blurted out something rather naive, "Ruth, how many plants have you crammed in there?" 8. 10. She looked at me with the gentle amusement one reserves for a child asking a silly question and simply said, 4. Just 4 plants, she added, but they'll provide more than we can eat and preserve. To be honest, I didn't believe her. I smiled and nodded outwardly, but internally, I was convinced, there's no way 4 tomato plants in 1.5 square meters are outproducing my 12 plants in a full row. Absolutely no way. Yet, about 6 weeks later, a neighbor of theirs, who did own a phone, sent me some photographs. Ruth had meticulously kept a tally, and I absolutely love this, because she maintains a garden journal every year in a small composition notebook. The result, 96 kilograms from just 4 plants in roughly 1.5 square meters. 96 kilograms. She had counted every single harvest. Today, I'm going to guide you through the precise, step-by-step method the Amish use to cultivate tomatoes in these intensive raised beds. You'll learn how to implement this system in your own backyard this season, even if you only have a small patio or a tiny side yard. And make sure to stay until the very end, because I'll reveal a unique foliar feeding technique I learned from Ruth's mother-in-law, a woman well into her 70s. This method can boost your fruit set by up to 30% during peak summer heat, and I've never encountered it in any mainstream gardening book. Let me be clear, I am not a beginner gardener. I've devoured Mel Bartholomew's Square Foot Gardening, cover to cover. I've meticulously studied Eliot Coleman's intensive methods and followed university extension bulletins from Cornell, Clemson, and Oregon State. I've experimented with every intensive spacing chart, every elaborate organic fertilizer blend, and every pruning philosophy, from the single-stem Florida weave to the let-it-go-wild approach. Yet, what I discovered during my time with families in Lancaster County, and later in communities in Holmes County, Ohio, and northern Indiana, was that my entire approach to growing tomatoes had been fundamentally backward. My focus was on providing each plant maximum space, then attempting to force production through artificial inputs. The Amish, however, concentrate on constructing the perfect growing environment within a small footprint, then allowing the plant to thrive according to its natural inclinations. This profound shift changed everything for me, and it didn't require purchasing a single new product. There's a concept in Amish life called Gelassenheit, a Pennsylvania Dutch word that roughly translates to yielding, letting be, or submission to the natural order. In their faith, it signifies humility before God and community. In the garden, however, Gelassenheit manifests as a deep, unwavering trust in natural systems. You build the soil correctly, plant with intention, then step back and allow the biology to perform the heavy lifting. You cease fighting the garden and begin cooperating with it. When you have 8, 10, or 12 people at the dinner table every night, with no grocery store to fall back on and no budget for store-bought tomatoes, you quickly learn that working against nature is both costly and exhausting. Conversely, working with nature is sustainable and incredibly abundant. And this is precisely where science unequivocally supports their methods. Researchers at Cornell University have published studies demonstrating that tomato plants cultivated in biologically active, compost-rich soil, teeming with proper microbial communities, can increase nutrient uptake efficiency by 40 to 60% compared to plants grown in soil managed primarily with synthetic fertilizers. The Amish intuitively understood this through 5, 6, even 7 generations of careful observation. The soil scientists simply caught up. So, let's delve into the method. Step 1 is constructing the bed, and I emphasize constructing it right, because this forms the essential foundation upon which everything else depends. I observed Ruth's husband, Eli, build a raised frame from untreated hardwood, approximately 1.2 meters wide by 1.2 meters long. The crucial detail here is its depth, at least 45 centimeters deep. Not 20 centimeters, like most raised bed kits you find online, nor 30 centimeters, a minimum of 45 centimeters, and 60 centimeters is even better. This depth is vital. Tomato roots, particularly those of indeterminate varieties, can extend 0.9, 1, 2, or even 1.5 meters deep under ideal conditions. However, the top 45 centimeters is where 80% of the feeder roots reside, and these are the roots actively absorbing water and nutrients. By providing them with a full 45 centimeters of perfect, uncompacted, biologically active soil, you create a root zone that most in-ground gardens simply cannot replicate, as many of us contend with compacted clay or sandy subsoil beneath the first 15 to 20 centimeters. Next, step 2 focuses on the soil mix itself. This is where 90% of gardeners, including my past self, make a critical error. I used to simply buy bags of raised bed mix from large retailers and dump them in. The Amish approach, however, is radically different. Ruth's specific blend, which I observed her creating for a new bed, consists of roughly 1/3 aged barnyard manure, composted for at least a full year, 1/3 finished leaf mold compost, and 1/3 native topsoil from their property. To this, she incorporates about 2 double handfuls of wood ash per bed, along with a similar quantity of crushed eggshells, which she diligently collects in a bucket by the stove throughout the winter. Noticeably absent are purchased fertilizers, peat moss, or vermiculite. The wood ash supplies potassium and subtly elevates the pH, which tomatoes adore, preferring a range of about 6.2 to 6.8. The eggshell provides a slow-release source of calcium, crucial because if you've ever lost tomatoes to blossom end rot, you know it's typically a calcium uptake problem. She preemptively addresses this issue before the plant even enters the ground. Regarding timing, which varies by your climate zone, for zones 3 and 4, ideally, construct these beds in late September or October, allowing the soil to meld and the biology to establish over winter beneath a straw mulch. In zones 5 through 7, you can build in the autumn or very early spring, ensuring at least 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost date. For zones 8 and 9, you can construct a bed and plant into it within 2 to 3 weeks, provided your manure is properly aged. Research from the University of Florida has shown that allowing a compost-based soil mix to biologically stabilize for at least 3 weeks prior to planting significantly reduces transplant shock by over 40%. So, resist the urge to rush this crucial step. Step 3 concerns variety selection, an aspect of the Amish approach that genuinely surprised me. I anticipated Ruth would exclusively cultivate heirloom varieties passed down through generations, and indeed, she does grow heirlooms, brandywine and a yellow variety she calls grandmother's gold, which I haven't been able to identify elsewhere. However, 2 of her 4 plants were modern, disease-resistant hybrids. She told me, and I recall this vividly, the old ones taste like heaven, but the new ones don't quit. What she meant was she strategically pairs heavy-producing, disease-resistant varieties such as an improved, Better Boy, Defiant, or Mountain Merit, with 1 or 2 heirloom varieties purely for their exceptional flavor. The hybrids bear the brunt of the production, while the heirlooms provide that incomparable taste you simply can't find in a store. It's a profoundly practical approach, devoid of romanticism or ideology. It's simply about feeding the family. If you're in zones 3 through 5, where the growing season is shorter, opt for early maturing varieties like Stupus, Glacier, or New Girl alongside a main season hybrid. For zones 6 through 8, you have the luxury of a full season, so consider Brandywine or Cherokee Purple, complemented by a reliable workhorse hybrid. In Zone 9, explore heat-set varieties such as Solar Fire or Florida 91, as standard varieties frequently drop their blossoms when night temperatures consistently remain above 24 degrees Celsius. Step 4 details the planting technique, and this is where things become truly fascinating. Most of us simply dig a hole, drop the transplant in, perhaps bury the stem a little deeper, and consider it done. What I witnessed Ruth do, however, is trench planting. She lays the transplant on its side in a trench about 10 to 13 centimeters deep, gently curving the top few centimeters of the stem upwards so the leaf cluster remains above soil level. Then, she buries the entire horizontal stem. Every single one of those tiny hairs on a tomato stem is a potential root node. By burying 15, 20, or even 25 centimeters of stem horizontally in that top layer of biologically active soil, you cultivate a root system that is 3 to 4 times larger than what you'd achieve with standard vertical planting. Researchers at North Carolina State have documented this, showing that trench-planted tomatoes develop significantly more adventitious roots, demonstrating faster establishment and higher early-season yields compared to deep-planted or standard-planted controls. Now, let's talk spacing. For plants in a 1.2 by 1.2 meter bed. That's roughly 1 plant per 0.37 square meters. She positions them in a diamond pattern, not a square, with each plant approximately 50 to 60 centimeters from its nearest neighbor and about 30 to 35 centimeters from the nearest bed wall. This sounds tight, and it is, but here's why it's so effective. Every plant is trained to produce 2 main stems, not 1, not 6, but precisely 2. She religiously removes all other suckers, starting from day 1. 2 stems per plant means 8 total fruiting stems in that bed. Each stem is meticulously tied to its own vertical support on the cedar lattice, which extends up to about 2.1 meters. These stems are trained straight upwards and kept separate, ensuring ample airflow between them. Sunlight reaches the lower leaves, and she can easily run her fingers along each stem to check for any issues. I adopted this diamond pattern with 2-stem training 4 years ago, and my per-plant yield soared from around 2.7 kilograms to consistently over 18 kilograms per plant. That is not an exaggeration. I weigh everything now, all thanks to Ruth and her little composition notebook. Step 5 addresses the watering system, and I emphasize system, not simply dragging a hose around. Ruth employs a straightforward gravity-fed drip arrangement. Her husband installed a 190-liter barrel on a platform about 1.2 meters off the ground next to the bed. A short hose exits the bottom of the barrel and connects to a soaker line that spirals around the base of the 4 plants, concealed beneath the mulch. She fills the barrel each morning, and it slowly drips out over approximately 8 to 10 hours. That's all there is to it. The soil remains consistently moist, yet never waterlogged. Crucially, there is never any overhead watering. Overhead watering is the primary method by which early blight, septoria leaf spot, and numerous other fungal issues are introduced into your tomato patch. If constructing a barrel setup isn't feasible for you, a simple drip line connected to a battery-powered timer, set to run for 45 minutes each morning, will achieve the same outcome. The essential principle is slow, low, consistent watering, applied directly at the soil level. Research from Oregon State has demonstrated that consistent soil moisture, rather than the total volume of water applied, is the main factor driving both fruit size and the prevention of blossom end rot and cracking. It's not about how much you water, it's about ensuring the soil never experiences a drastic wet-dry cycle. Step 6 covers the mulch and feeding cycle. Once the plants are established, typically about 2 weeks after transplanting, Ruth applies a thick layer of straw mulch, crucially, straw, not hay. Hay is often laden with wheat seeds, meaning you'll spend the remainder of the summer relentlessly weeding grass from your bed. She spreads a generous 10 to 13 centimeters of clean wheat straw around and between the plants, deliberately leaving a small collar of bare soil directly around each stem to prevent stem rot. Then, every 2 weeks throughout the growing season, she gently pulls back the mulch and side dresses each plant with approximately 2 cups of that same aged manure compost, subsequently pushing the mulch back into place. Additionally, she adds a light sprinkle of wood ash every 4th week. This constitutes her entire fertilization program: no fish emulsion, no seaweed extract, no CalMag bottles, no intricate feeding schedules, just consistent compost and ash every 2 weeks. The scientific basis for this approach is robust. A study from the University of Georgia demonstrated that consistent, small applications of compost throughout the growing season resulted in higher total yields and superior fruit quality compared to a single large application of either compost or synthetic fertilizer at planting time. This slow, steady method continuously nourishes and activates the soil biology, which, in turn, keeps the plant well-fed and vibrant. Because that biology is alive and thriving in Ruth's beds, nutrient cycling occurs around the clock. These microbes continuously break down the compost and convert it into plant-available forms. I've been adhering to this exact 2-week compost side dressing schedule for 3 years now, and my plants maintain a deep, healthy green right through September, without a single bottle of liquid fertilizer. Let me share some common patterns I've observed in conventional tomato growing and how this Amish approach addresses them differently. I engaged in most of these practices myself for years, so absolutely no judgment here. The first pattern is overspacing. Most gardening guides, which I followed religiously, instruct you to space tomatoes 90 centimeters apart in rows that are 1.2 to 1.5 meters apart. This feels logical because you desire air circulation, room to walk, and each plant to have its own territory. However, here's the problem: all that open soil between widely spaced plants is wasted biological real estate. It dries out faster, heats up more, weeds readily colonize it, and you end up watering and mulching a vast area to support relatively few plants. The Amish intensive approach places more plants in less space but manages them vertically with aggressive pruning to just 2 stems. You achieve excellent air circulation through vertical training, not excessive horizontal spacing. After adopting this method, my production per square meter more than tripled, and my water usage actually decreased because I was irrigating a concentrated area instead of a sprawling row. The second pattern is fertilizer dependency. I used to adhere to a weekly liquid feeding schedule with a tomato-specific fertilizer. At about $10 a bottle, I'd go through 4 or 5 bottles a season. It felt like I was being a diligent plant parent, but what I was actually doing, and research from Michigan State supports this, was entirely bypassing the soil food web. When you constantly spoon-feed synthetic nutrients directly to the plant, the mycorrhizal fungi and beneficial bacteria in the soil have nothing to do, they decline. Your soil transforms into a lifeless growing medium, and the plant becomes entirely dependent on you. The Amish compost-based approach, in contrast, feeds the soil, not the plant. The soil biology processes the compost and delivers nutrients to the roots in the forms and at the rates the plant genuinely requires. It's the difference between an intravenous drip of sugar water and a nourishing, home-cooked meal. The third pattern is sucker anxiety. This plagued me for years. Every gardening video and magazine article instilled terror about tomato suckers. Prune them all. No, leave them all. Prune only below the first flower cluster. I was constantly second-guessing myself. What I learned from observing Ruth is beautifully simple. She selects the 2 strongest suckers low on the plant, typically the one just below and just above the first flower cluster, and these become her 2 main stems. Everything else is pinched off while it's still small, no larger than a pencil. She doesn't agonize over it or pore over articles. She simply walks the bed every couple of days, spots anything growing where it shouldn't, and snaps it off between her thumb and finger in about half a second. 2 stems per plant, everything else goes. This clarity of approach eliminates the decision fatigue that overwhelms so many of us, and the science backs it up. Researchers at the University of Missouri found that 2-stem pruned tomatoes on vertical supports yielded the highest marketable harvest per square meter of any pruning method they tested. The fourth pattern is blight panic. The moment most of us spot a brown mark on a lower leaf, we instinctively reach for a fungicide spray, copper, neem oil, dacano, whatever we can get our hands on. Ruth, however, sprays nothing. Her blight prevention is entirely structural. The deep straw mulch prevents soil splash, which is how most fungal spores reach the lower leaves. The vertical training keeps foliage off the ground. The drip watering ensures leaves remain dry, and she strips every leaf below the first fruit cluster once the plant reaches about 90 centimeters tall. She refers to this as lifting the skirt. It creates a clean gap between the soil and the foliage, allowing air to circulate freely and preventing spores from easily bridging the distance. I haven't sprayed a fungicide on my tomatoes in 4 seasons using this approach, and I've experienced significantly less blight than in all the years I was spraying weekly. Now, I want to share something truly remarkable that I learned from Ruth's mother-in-law, a woman named Ada, who I estimate was in her mid-70s when we met. She possessed strong, weathered hands and a quiet demeanor. She didn't speak much, but when she did, you listened intently because her words were always profound. Ada demonstrated a specific foliar feeding technique she employs during the hottest part of summer, typically from late June through mid-August. This is when tomato plants often struggle with fruit set because pollen viability decreases significantly in extreme heat. Her method involves taking a handful of well-finished compost, the really dark, crumbly, earthy-smelling kind, and steeping it in a bucket of water overnight, much like a tea bag. The following morning, she strains the liquid through an old piece of cloth, pours it into a watering can fitted with a fine rose on the spout, and gently showers it over the tomato foliage in the early morning, before the sun reaches the plants. This takes about 30 seconds per plant. She performs this ritual twice a week during heat waves. She simply calls it giving them their morning tea. It sounds almost deceptively simple to be effective. However, here's the underlying science: that compost tea is teeming with beneficial microbes, soluble potassium, trace minerals, and natural plant growth hormones produced by the microbial community during decomposition. When applied to the foliage in the cool morning, the leaf stomata are open, allowing them to directly absorb these nutrients and microbes. A study from the University of Connecticut found that foliar applications of aerated compost tea during heat stress periods improved fruit set in tomatoes by 22 to 31% compared to untreated control plants. As an added benefit, the beneficial microbes also colonize the leaf surface, outcompeting pathogenic fungi and providing a layer of disease suppression. I began incorporating Ada's morning tea ritual 4 summers ago. My mid-July fruit set, which previously plummeted dramatically when temperatures hit around 35 degrees Celsius, now barely falters. I meticulously tracked it last year, my heat-stressed plants treated with the tea set fruit on 87% of blossoms, compared to about 60% on my untreated control plants. That's nearly a third more tomatoes during the most crucial weeks of the season. The Amish don't possess a secret fertilizer, nor do they have a magical tomato variety unavailable to the rest of us. What they have is a profound philosophy: cultivate living soil, plant with purpose in a confined space, train the plant with absolute clarity, and then wholeheartedly trust the system. Achieving 90 kilograms from 4 plants in 1.5 square meters is not a gimmick, it's the natural outcome when you cease battling the garden and instead begin cooperating with it. If you've experimented with intensive tomato growing or a method similar to this, please share your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear which varieties are thriving for you, your climate zone, the yields you're observing, and any insights you've gained. If you're entirely new to this, I encourage you to start with just one bed, 1.2 meters by 1.2 meters, 45 centimeters deep. Construct it meticulously, fill it with rich compost and aged manure, allow it to stabilize for a few weeks, and then plant 4 robust transplants this spring. Train each to 2 stems on a sturdy support structure. Maintain consistent, slow, low-level watering. Apply a deep layer of mulch, and side dress with compost every 2 weeks. You will be utterly astonished by what 4 plants can accomplish when you provide them with the optimal environment and simply get out of their way. Subscribe to Sovereign Garden if you wish for more deep dives into how traditional cultures approach gardening. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I'll see you in the next one.